Hello, this is Professor Fortin, and this is a brief discussion of label versus labeling in the food law because some of you struggled with this distinction. Yes, of course, you know the definitions, but note that labeling is broader than label in two ways. Can you see both of them? The one that I'm covering here is the second, accompanying such article. Before we move on, note that labeling and advertising overlap. Congress intended this overlap. However, at some point, labeling ends and only advertising law applies. FDA took action against Cordell and his company because he produced pamphlets and other literature that recommended using Cordell's manufactured supplements for health reasons, including curing and treating diseases. There was no doubt that Cordell was using the pamphlets to sell his company's supplements. However, Cordell argued that the literature was not labeling because the literature was shipped separately from the pills. So thus, they did not accompany the pills. However, the court held that Cordell's literature was labeling. Why? Well, some of you took the simple, quick answer. Some of you thought it was only because of the marketing. Well, marketing does make a huge difference in regulation. It changes everything significantly. But it's not enough to turn literature into labeling. That huge difference might mean FTC is involved in regulating the advertising. So it's important for you to compare the Cordell case to the Sterling Vinegar case. When you see two related cases like this together, it's important for you to tease out the detail of the differences, the distinctions, and learn what that means. In short, the Cordell court found that the literature and foods were interdependent. That's the exact word the court used, and that's important. So you need to examine how they were interdependent. So let's look. There is a common origin. Even though they were produced in separate factories, they were designed and produced for and by Cordell, and Cordell supplied them to consumers and retail establishments, both of them. And there's a clear connection to sale. There was no question that the literature was being used in the marketing. It was being used to help and drive sales of the Cordell supplements. And sometimes the literature was mailed to consumers of the Cordell pills. Sometimes it was given away by retailers when consumers purchased the Cordell pills. Sometimes it was just available for free, or some of the books were available for sale at health food stores. And finally, a fourth thing, the literature explained how to use Cordell's pills to treat and cure diseases. Now, not just any vitamins and other supplements, but specifically named in the literature were Cordell's brand name products. So that's four connections, and you may not need all four, but you shouldn't leave any out when you're doing an analysis of a case. Clearly, there's more here than simple marketing. That's what a very important thing. But you would look for any evidence that you can find in a case that you might have for something that would be creating interdependence. So let's compare to the Sterling Vinegar case next. But first, the major rule. Physical attachment and proximity are not needed for the material to accompany a food and become labeling. And mailing separately does not shield the literature from becoming labeling. Some interconnection, interdependence is required to turn them into labeling. Well, what if the products are not interdependent? The folk medicine book here described how to use vinegar and honey to treat and cure a variety of ailments. The book was a bestseller, and it was a bestseller for 2 years before Sterling came out with their vinegar and honey product. Both products were sold at health food stores, sometimes side by side, and there's no doubt that the books clearly increased the sale of vinegar and honey mix. And Sterling was clearly filling the market created in part by the book. Moreover, the books explained how to use the mixture just like Cordell's literature did for Cordell's pills, except that it talked about vinegar and honey generically. It never mentioned Sterling brand vinegar and honey. And the FDA looked at this and they said, they saw the books side by side with the vinegar and honey mix, and FDA claimed the folk medicine book was labeling. Some health food stores were selling them much like labeling, but the author did not integrate these products. He was not marketing any products. And the book didn't mention, as I said, Sterling's brand. So the court found that FDA had overreached. The speech of the author can't be constrained because of how other people use it. The food might be falsely marketed, but in this case, the books would not be considered labeling. Let me add that you could have a situation where the books would become labeling, something to think about, maybe talk about it in the discussion forum. When would these books become labeling? And who would be responsible for that then? If, for example, you have a retail store that ties a copy of the book onto a bottle of vinegar and honey. Now it's attached physically to the bottle. Is that labeling? Well, the court found in this case there was no, quote, immediate connection for it to become labeling. It was in the Cordell court had used interconnected. This one says immediate connection. So I encourage you to go back and compare these two cases, find the distinctions. Do this for yourself, but I'll give you a hint. There's more than one difference. There's more than one distinction. One is a simple fact difference, but the other is a difference overall how you would characterize the connection between the literature and the food. So you have to compile the facts as evidence rather than point to a single fact. You have to compile the evidence, to strengthen it, to eventually find a connection. I encourage you to do this and post your answer in the discussion forum. As always, please post any questions you might have on this in the discussion forum.